Welcome to the Cursed Hour, where true horror never sleeps. If this story chills your spine or makes you question the darkness around you, hit that like button, share the fear, and let us know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe now and step into the hour where curses come alive. Story number 1. The Mannequin's Gaze. The road was dark, but the forest saw as a motorcyclist. I savored the freedom of the open road, riding my 50cc dirt bike from my girlfriend's house through a dense, unlit forest. I'm a motorcyclist and was driving my way down from my girlfriend's house. The road goes through a forest without any streetlights. The night wrapped the trees in shadow, their branches clawing at the sky, untouched by streetlights. So, I ride through the forest, already giving everything to my little 50cc dirt bike. My headlights carved a narrow path, the engine's hum, my only companion. But the forest wasn't empty. It was waiting. The figure loomed, and fear struck, pushing the bike to its limit. I leaned into the curves, the cold air biting my face, when my headlights caught something unnatural. A naked mannequin, stark and still, on the road's edge. A naked mannequin is suddenly visible on the side of the road. I saw it appear in my headlights and drove by it, doing 60 kilometers an hour. Its pale form glowed, rigid and human-like, staring into the void. It was scary as hell. A mannequin standing there naked on the side of a dark road in a forest. My heart seized, the bike wobbling as I sped past. It wasn't just plastic. It felt alive. The gaze followed, and my mind raced. The mannequin's image burned into me, its eyeless face somehow tracking my flight. I gripped the handlebars, urging the bike faster, but the forest seemed to tighten, branches brushing closer. I'm sure if any one of you would have passed it in the same situation, that you'd have all got shivers. 2. Why was it there? A prank? Something worse? No store, no town, no reason for it to stand in that desolate stretch. The road stretched on, but its stare didn't fade. The silence screamed, and doubt gnawed. The engine's roar couldn't drown my thoughts. Was it really a mannequin? Its pose, too perfect, too deliberate, felt staged, like a warning or a lure. The forest darkness pressed heavier, the absence of light or life amplifying every sound, the hum of my bike, the wind, my own breath. I glanced back, half expecting it to move, but saw only black. The mannequin stood still, but its presence chased me. The escape lingered, and the chills stayed. I reached civilization, lights piercing the night, but the mannequin's gaze clung to me, a shiver I couldn't shake. Who placed it? What did it mean? I've ridden countless roads, but none felt so watched, so wrong. The forest keeps its secret, and I'll never ride that path again. The mannequin's silent stare haunts every dark turn, a reminder of the night I wasn't alone. Story number 2, echoes of the playground rivalry. The neighborhood loomed like a silent witness, its worn streets hiding truths no child should uncover, its windows glinting under the evening's pale glow, casting shadows that danced with a life of their own. I stepped outside, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Grass, asphalt, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my name. The playground stretched, its pavement warping as if the streets themselves were bending time, its edges all with a pulse I couldn't name. I was no stranger to play, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth that pulsed in the dark. The swings creaked, their chains groaning as I moved, their sound a rhythm that stirred in the silence, a rhythm that wasn't mine. The mirror-like puddle nearby glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the bar, but the faces were gone, the water still, the silence heavier. The streets weren't empty, they were full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. I wandered deeper, the alleys stretching ahead, their walls bending as if the neighborhood was watching, waiting. The streetlights flickered, their beams warping into patterns that weren't random, patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air grew denser, thick, with a weight that pressed against my mind, a weight that followed me, a weight that refused to fade. The place wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows, something that knew I was here. The dusk deepened, the area's pulse a drumbeat under my steps, but the silence was a predator, its shadows creeping, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my defiance, its weight a frail shield against the unknown, but the corners disagreed, their presence alive with mystery. I was a witness, a target, a child marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The wind murmured, the streets a canvas of leases spent and lost, its paths holding echoes of those who'd grown here, those who'd never left. I was no stranger to school, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me, a truth that shaped me, a truth I couldn't shake. I stood the ground a frail defense, but the shadows moved, their edges alive, their presence a truth that pulsed in the stillness. I'm a 32-year-old male, and I was in first grade when this took place. It's a famous story in my family. Growing up, I hated school for many reasons, and one of those reasons was that I was always the target for bullying. Admittedly, I was a weird kid. The neighborhood's pulse was a spark, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the bus. I would talk to myself, blurt out random lines from movies completely out of context, and the slightest insult would send me into a rage. My bullies got a real kick out of this and would make fun of me every time to get a rise. The teasing would only end once I started pummeling them. And this story is about my very first bully called Ajax. It began one day on the bus heading home. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. The neighborhood's shadows deepened as I rode, the bus's pulse a drumbeat under my seat. But the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my frustration, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Grass, asphalt, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the seats. The streets weren't just a route, they were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the aisle stretching, its edges warping as if the neighborhood was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror-like glass reflected, its image warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on my bag, but the faces were gone. The glass clear, the silence heavier. The streets weren't empty, they were full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The seats loomed ahead, their shadows deepened, but the air was wrong, heavy, with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory, not my own. I heard flashes, voices in alleys, footsteps on paths, faces I didn't know but felt I should. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow swallowed by the dark, its path bending as if the streets were warping, reshaping to keep me here. The place wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. I stepped back, the seat a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the neighborhood was watching, waiting. The ride was a weight, the area a prison, its paths a canvas of lives bent and lost, its shadows holding echoes of those who'd grown here, those who'd never left. I was a witness, a target, a child marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The dusk filtered through the windows, but the streets disagreed, their shadows lingering, their pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to school, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood was a record, a canvas of lives spent and lost, its walls holding echoes of those who'd passed through, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. I was talking to a girl I liked at the time called Diana when suddenly the skinny blonde kid who was about half a head taller than me leans over his seat behind me and says, "Dylan's the Milan's a baby." Now, any of you know what a mill is? Yeah, me either. But the na-na tune was enough for me to turn my head and make it red, and being called a baby didn't help either. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the stop. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. And before I knew it, I started fighting back against my bullies. So I just screamed at him over and over for him to shut up, which of course he didn't. Then Diana started yelling at him to shut up too, which only made him laugh. Now, we should also note that Ajax lived just across the street from me. So, this merciless taunting continued even after the bus pulled up at my stop. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in my mind, a truth that followed me to the yard. The memories of this part of my life are so vague. I'll jump to a few days later. I was playing outside when Ajax and his friends cornered me and took turns pushing me and calling me names. I yelled at them to stop because it worked the first time, but they carried on harassing me. I lost it, grabbed an air pump and began swinging it at them. The streets were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood shadows followed me as I played, the yard's pulse a drumbeat under my feet. but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my anger, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Grass, asphalt, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the ground. The streets weren't just a space. They were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the driveway stretching, its edges warping as if the neighborhood was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror-like glass reflected, its image warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the pump, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The streets weren't empty, they were full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The yard loomed ahead, its shadows deepened, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I heard flashes, voices in alleys, footsteps on paths, faces I didn't know but felt I should. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow swallowed by the dark, its path bending as if the streets were warping, reshaping to keep me here. The place wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. I stepped back, the grass of frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the neighborhood was watching, waiting. The afternoon was a wait. The area a prison, its paths a canvas of lives spent and lost, its shadows holding echoes of those who'd grown here, those who'd never left. I was a witness, a target, a child marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The light filtered through the trees, but the streets disagreed, their shadows lingering, their pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to fights, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood was a record, a canvas of lives spent and lost, its walls holding echoes of those who'd passed through, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. And I actually managed to chase them a few blocks before I turned around and went home. But now for the meat of the story. 2 days later, I was playing outside again when Ajax starts making fun of me from across the street. I don't remember what he said, but I walked over to give him a piece of my mind. And as soon as I got close to him, he grabbed the toy I'd have been playing without my hand hard, which in hindsight wasn't a smart thing to bring, and threw it up onto the roof of his mom's garage. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows, a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the chase. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. Furious, I went to grab him, but he turned and ran. I chased him around to the backyard, and when I turned the corner, I stopped in my tracks. I don't think I'll ever forget what I saw. There, tied to a tree and crying, was Diana. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in my mind, a truth that followed me to the tree. No joke. Ajax stood next to her, laughing. To this day, I don't know what he did to her. My shock was swiftly replaced with the fury of a demon, and I grabbed the sharpest stick I could find and lunged at the laughing idiot. He caught my wrist and we grappled for a while. The streets were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood's shadows followed me as I fought, the backyard's pulse a drumbeat under my feet. But the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my rage, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Grass, asphalt, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the ground. The streets weren't just a space, they were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the tree stretching, its branches warping as if the neighborhood was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror-like glass reflected, its image warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the stick. But the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The streets weren't empty, they were full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The yard loomed ahead, its shadows deepened, but the air was wrong. Heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I heard flashes, voices in alleys, footsteps on paths, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow swallowed by the dark, its path bending as if the streets were warping, reshaping to keep me here. The place wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. I stepped back, the tree a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the neighborhood was watching, waiting. The afternoon was a wait, the area a prison, its paths as canvas of lips, bent and lost, its shadows holding echoes of those who'd grown here, those who'd never left. I was a witness, a target, a child marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The light filtered through the leaves, but the streets disagreed, their shadows lingering, their pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to conflict, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood was a record, a canvas of liquors spent and lost, its walls holding echoes of those who'd passed through, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. Me snarling, him laughing. As we fought, he knelt down and reached for a yellow water pistol lying on the ground. I stomped on his hand and somehow managed to drop the stick and gave Ajax a shove. Turned and ran to the front porch where I grabbed the closest thing to a weapon I could find, a metal canteen, and then hid myself and waited. After a long, silent minute, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. When I saw it was Ajax, I swung the canteen as hard as I could down on his head. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the porch. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. And without waiting to see what would happen next, I ran back to the backyard, untied Diana, and walked her home. I won't lie. At the time, I was feeling like a superhero. Until years later that I learned from Ajax's mom that I had actually knocked him out cold and completely ruined the canteen. We only fought one time after that. It was about a year or two later when he started giving me crap again. I grabbed a fake sword that I had made by removing the plastic blade and replacing it with strips of metal from my dad's shed and went across the street to teach him a lesson. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight. Its shadows, a truth that lingered in my mind, a truth that followed me to the driveway. He grabbed a chain and we circled each other in his driveway, swinging at each other and exchanging insults. Thankfully, one of the adults, I forget who, saw the fight and broke it up before one of us got seriously injured. After that, we actually slowly became friends, though it was still a bit weird when we hung out. Once he tried unsuccessfully to get me to eat dog crap, and another time after that, he moaned me when we went swimming in his pool. But aside from that, we got along okay. The streets were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood's shadows lingered as we bonded, the pool's pulse a drumbeat under my feet. But the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my relief, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place, grass, asphalt, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the water. The streets weren't just a space, they were a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the driveway stretching, its edges warping as if the neighborhood was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror-like glass reflected, its image warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the controller, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The streets weren't empty, they were full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The yard loomed ahead, its shadows deepened, but the air was wrong, heavy, with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I heard flashes, voices in alleys, footsteps on paths, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow swallowed by the dark, its path bending as if the streets were warping, reshaping to keep me here. The place wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. I stepped back, the pool a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the neighborhood was watching, waiting. The afternoon was a wait, the area a prison, its paths a canvas of leaves spent and lost, its shadows holding echoes of those who'd grown here, those who'd never left. I was a witness, a friend, a child marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The light filtered through the trees, but the streets disagreed. Their shadows lingering, their pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to rivalry, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth I couldn't escape. The neighborhood was a record, a canvas of lips spent and lost, its walls holding echoes of those who'd passed through, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. We played video games and even made a movie together in which I played a goblin, his sister, a princess, and he the prince. Sadly, though, the very last thing I heard from Ajax was that he threw a dart at his mom's head and ended up in a mental institution. His mom survived, but I have no idea where he is to this day. Not the scariest story, Stumpy. After all, I was only 6, and seeing my childhood crush bound and crying on my bully's property was an experience that will stay with me until my dying day. The neighborhood's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the end. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. The neighborhood was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't unsee. I moved on. The memory, a frail defense, but the shadows moved, their edges alive, their presence a truth that pulsed in my thoughts. Story number 3, The Secret Tunnel. The basement's chill whispered of secrets, buried in dust. A hole yawned behind the boards, daring us to crawl. The tunnel stretched, damp and alive with unseen eyes. Boots echoed above, a world unaware of our descent. Some paths lead not to freedom, but to forbidden truths. As a teenager, I lived in an old apartment building across from a bar. Its basement, a forgotten maze where no one ventured, making it a magnet for me and my friends to explore. The basement had 4 rooms, one small, off to the side, filled with old liquor bottles and ravioli jars from the 1930s, relics of a bygone era. At the room's far end, boards leaned against the wall, and we moved them, revealing a hole large enough to crawl through. Curiosity drove us, and with flashlights, we entered the tunnel, a dark, damp passage crawling with insects, the air thick with mold. Cars rumbled overhead, signaling we were under the road, a 50-foot stretch that pressed against us, its confines suffocating. The tunnel ended at a nailed board. Impossible to turn back in the tight space, so we kicked until it broke, shards splintering as we crawled into a dark room. 3 of us, hearts pounding, searched for a light switch, finding none. Our flashlights sweeping a basement void, no doors in sight, only a small wooden hatch in the ceiling. We climbed through, emerging into another basement, and ascended stairs to find ourselves in the bar across the street. The bartender stormed over, yelling, joined by the owner, demanding answers. We explained our adventure, and they revealed the tunnel was a Prohibition-era secret. The bar once a speakeasy. The hum rose, a pulse in the air. The holes dark my mirror, the tunnel's weight a truth. The bar's glow dimmed, the owner's voice a warning of paths not meant for us. I sought meaning, scouring tales of hidden routes, finding whispers, tunnels scuffed, secrets kept, no end. A 1920s log spoke of a runner, his path a ritual, his dark a vow. The hum named it, glyphs, faint, organic, warm on my skin, the floor marking us, a kick-for of passages, his tunnel a gate, our crawl his stage. I checked shadows, fearing its call, the insects crawl my scar. We moved on, the basement sealed, but the tunnel's hum clung, the bar's secret, my fate. A maze of unseen depths. The hum was my shadow, our lives a frail shield against the tunnel's dark. The nailed board, its broken shards, cut me still. The bar's skills yell, a wound in my soul. We surfaced. But the speakeasy's truth, its hidden path, haunted me, the hum, a vow I couldn't break. The basement was his, its hole a shrine. The roads rumble his kingdom, claiming all who dared up. I felt its pull, the runner's steps eternal, the hum a pulse that scripted my fear. I hid, nights restless, dreams crawling, but the hum sang, predicting my breaths. The tunnel's damp in every shadow, the bottle's dust, their ancient seal, glowed in my sleep. The hatches creak, my air, I burned my questions, fearing its depths. But the glyphs, warm, organic, spread on my skin, my walls, my eyes, a mark of its claim, the road's echo, its unseen weight, hummed in every silence. The owner's glare, my mirror, I scoured tales, speakeasies lost, tunnels sealed, no end. A Liton Ten's tale spoke of a guardian, his path a curse, his dark a prayer. The hum named him, its glyphs a road, his silence a gate, my dread his song. I fled forward, chasing light, but the hum roared. The glyphs a tide, the basement's chill in every dawn. The tunnel choked me, its insects in every shadow. The hatches locked my noose, I burned my past, fearing its gaze, but the hum kept it. The runners crawl my breaths. I ran to streets, towns, but the paths called. The hum, a broadcast, you're his. My eyes glowed. The glyphs, my scar, my life, a ritual he wove. The flashlight's beam burned in my dreams. The bar's hum, my fate, his tunnel, my end. One night, the hum surged, a shadow in my mirror, eyes unseen, board in hand. I froze, hands still, watching his shadow, fading, dissolving into the dark. The hum was me, its glyphs my blood, the basement my world. He's waiting, his path a hymn, his silence a void where light dies. I write to resist, but the hum scripts my words, its glyph my chain, his dark my end, the secret tunnel claiming me forever in the night. Story number 4. The Basement's Lurker. The old school building loomed in a heavy silence, its weathered walls exhaling a damp chill that clung to my skin as I wandered the halls. The air thick with an unspoken tension. The corridor stretched into shadows that seemed to twist with intent, and a shiver ran through me, not from the cold, but from an unseen presence. The playground's laughter faded, leaving me isolated. A force lingered, its intent threading through the stillness, marking me as a target in this forgotten maze. The basement gate stood at the hallway's end, its iron bars trembling with a weight that made my breath catch as I passed, the air growing heavier with each step. I paused, the quiet too perfect, too still, and my heart thudded with a dread I couldn't name. My pulse raced as the silence warped, a faint shuffle rising from the depths, a sound that carried a threat. The seclusion of the locked shelter, cut off from the school's bustle, amplified my unease. No help, no escape, just me and the entity stirring below. Something was near, its presence a lurker I couldn't ignore. I lingered near the gate, the metal cold under my fingers, when a sensation gripped me, a pull, a weight that dragged my gaze into the darkness beyond. The air thickened, and the iron bars seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, making my chest tighten with fear. My breath caught as I stared, the school a stage for a hidden presence, the stairs a threshold to the unknown. The basement was no longer a storage room. It had become a lair, and the lurker was drawing me in. The recess turned chaotic, the air turning cold, a void settling as the gate swung open to reveal a crowd's panic. The fleeing kids, their terror-stricken faces, made my hands shake as I watched the entity's presence a weight I couldn't lift. My heart pounded as I stood back, the hallway a battleground, the unseen force driving the chaos. The day was a nightmare, and the lurker pulled me into a mystery I couldn't escape. The aftermath left a haunting question, the air pulsing with an unnatural chill as the gate was boarded up. The dwarf's description, the ankle grab, mocked our safety, and my breath came in gasps as I recalled the scene. My pulse raced as I pondered, the school a scar on my curiosity. The building had turned against us, and the lurker's shadow lingered, a riddle etched in every glance toward the basement. My school was old. It was built at the time when the kaitit was very common in my country. For those of you who don't know, that is when the army overthrows a democratic government and seizes power, sometimes violently. This is why, when my school was built, they decided to add a bomb shelter in the basement for safety reasons. The basement's eerie presence grew. Time went by, and thankfully the shelter was never necessary for its original purpose. So the school started to store old furniture and various other things down there, and it was sort of used like a huge basement. Try to imagine a basement the size of a tennis court. But enough background. I started school in the mid-90s, and since the first time I saw the basement gate, it gave me the creeps. It was at the very end of a long hallway, and since it was only composed of iron bars, you could see half the stairs, then the landing, and nothing more. Imagine a prison cell, but instead of a cell, there's a stairway. The chaos erupted unexpectedly. One day, when I was around 6 or 7, I was at recess when I heard a commotion coming from the basement hallway. When I got there was a big crowd of kids standing and pushing in front of the gate, trying to get in. The gate was open from time to time. One of the kids would get out of the basement, make his way through the other kids, and run away in terror. The sighting fueled the fear. Try to picture the scene. There was something down in the basement, and everyone was pushing their way inside because they wanted to see it. But when they finally did see it, they fled in horror. I stood there for a while, watching the chaos until I spotted one of my classmates coming out the basement running. I chased after him and finally caught up to him and asked him what was going on. To this day, I don't truly believe him. He said inside the basement, moving around, trying to hide behind the old furniture and boxes, was a dwarf. The mystery lingered unresolved. He said it was smaller than a kid, had a long, dark beard and bark-like gray skin, long ears, thin, long hair, and ragged clothes. Of course, I had to see this myself. But by the time I came back to the basement gate, it was already closed, and the teacher were trying to calm the kids down. There was a lot of commotion in the school during the next few days about the whole issue. The school's silence became a haunt. The open gate, the dwarf's tale, the ankle grab all wove a story of a day marked by a spectral enigma that clung to the basement's shadows. The school's denial, the boarded gate, hinted at a hidden truth, a danger I couldn't unravel. I left the scene, but the unease lingered, a scar on my school days. The building had turned hostile, and the lurker's shadow haunted every recess near the hallway. The crowd fueled my dread. The pushing kids, the fleeing terror, marked a presence I couldn't dismiss. The teacher's calm, the dwarf's description, painted a picture of disbelief. The entity, a thread I couldn't follow. I chased in panic, my heart racing. The gate, a threshold of fear. The lurker was a warning, and its pull dragged me into a relief tempered by curiosity. The aftermath reshaped my wonder. The parents' complaints, the board's cover, offered no closure. The dwarf's image a question that gnawed at me. The prank theory, the homeless man, suggested a mundane cover. A threat survived by doubt. I shared the tale, a caution to others, the school a mirror to vigilance. The lurker remained, a scar on my mind, a whisper of the unknown etched in the basement silence. Story number 5, The Mirror's Guest. You step into your quiet apartment, the air thick with a stillness that isn't rest. A shift you can't explain, not the hum of a sleeping household or the tick of a clock, but a silence that hides movement. In 3 minutes, you'll find a mirror moved, a presence that defies logic. This isn't a tale of ghostly chills or flickering lights. It's a riddle in your own space, where objects tell tales. What if the reflection you face holds more than your image? Enter the one-bedroom haven where the night rearranges secrets. The night shift left me weary, the mirror a shock. I work graveyard shifts at a hotel, returning to my one-bedroom apartment where some sleep in the living room. I always work graveyard shift at a hotel from 1100 p.m. to 7 encore. We had one of those cabinet mirrors that are not permanently attached, roughly 4'4", so it can easily be pulled up and moved elsewhere. Coming home, I found the big mirror leaning in my bedroom. I go to my bedroom and notice the big mirror leaning against the pallet. No one claimed it. A mystery unfolded. I asked one of my sisters, who was the only one getting ready, and she replied almost immediately saying, "I thought you moved it." The family denied, the scene unchanged. My sister's confusion grew as I denied moving it. I responded by saying, "Why would I move it? I just got here." She gave me a confused look. I then go to wake up my mom and other sister, and they both said that they had nothing to do with moving the mirror. The living room setup stayed intact, items unmoved. There were all kinds of things in front of the mirror, makeup boxes, and not to mention a vase that was almost as large as the mirror itself. All of the stuff in front of it was still there, and they weren't even moved. The path was tight, the act impossible. The walkway towards the bedroom is a bit crowded, too, because we have this couch bed that pulls out, taking up most of the space. A presence lingered, a figure in the glass. I pondered an intruder, but doors were locked. Possible scenarios. Someone came inside the house just to move the mirror. Obviously, very unlikely because 1, doors were locked and everyone in the house would have woken up to the sound of a door being opened. My sister saw a woman in white, alone. My sister has also seen a female in all white in the mirror while she was doing her makeup. This was on a day she was home alone. The unease grew. A guest unseen. There are a handful of unexpected things that happen in our apartment, and sometimes it feels a bit uneasy, or the feeling that something is there. The mystery deepened. Fear took root. No noise betrayed the move. A silent shift. If someone physically moved it, how did they do it by not waking anyone up? At this point, I really don't know who moved the mirror because I truly believe that none of my family members moved it. Paranormal seemed plausible. The mirror a portal, or alternatively something paranormal. And I honestly think that's what happened here. Like it literally moved or floated from the living room to my bedroom with no explanation at all. The weight of it haunted us. How did it happen? It really blows my mind. I don't know if it's just me being paranoid, but I do feel that way sometimes. We live with its shadow. The woman in white became a whisper. The mirror, a constant question. I check it daily, half expecting her gaze, a bond with the unseen shaping our nights. Story number 6, The Road to Unease. The town's familiar streets stretched out under a quiet night, a canvas of routine hiding a path that beckoned with an eerie pull. My friend and I, cruising in carefree laughter, stumbled upon a signpost to an unknown road, its name a stranger despite our lifelong roots here. The hum of music filled the car, masking the unease that crept into our bones as we veered toward the unknown. The trees closed in, their shadows twisting into a tunnel of dread, where a silent guardian watched our every move. A kangaroo's unblinking gaze ignited a primal fear, its stillness a warning we ignored, driving deeper into a mystery that gnawed at our sanity. Was it just a late-night whim, or had we crossed into a realm where we didn't belong? The road's relentless grip, the sickening dread, and the swift retreat left us haunted. A memory that clings to every drive past that cursed turnoff. What lurked there? And why does its shadow still darken our thoughts? I was driving around town with a friend sometime after midnight, talking crap and listening to music. We'd drive past this road with a signpost to an area neither of us have heard of, despite both living in this town our whole lives. I asked if she wanted to go see where the road went, and she said yes. So I pull a U-turn and off we go. It's a paved road with heavy trees on each side and a few houses. Nothing unusual for either of us. I was living on a street like this at the time. The road's familiarity soon faded, the houses thinning as the trees grew denser, their branches forming a canopy that dimmed the moonlight. Our chatter dwindled, replaced by an unspoken tension, the car's tires humming a rhythm that felt out of sync with the night. The unease crystallized into a tangible threat as we ventured further. Within about 5 minutes, the conversation just kind of dies off, and a few minutes after that, I start to get this uneasy feeling. Then we pass a kangaroo on the side of a road. It remained perfectly still, just turning its head to watch us drive past. I got this distinct impression it was standing guard. After that, I just got more and more anxious. I ended up turning to my friend and saying, "This is going to sound stupid, but can you?" She was already taking her seatbelt off. I'll lock the back doors. The kangaroo's stare pierced through the windshield, its eyes glowing faintly in the dark, a sentinel marking a boundary we'd crossed. My hands tightened on the wheel, my friend's quick movement to secure the doors echoing my growing panic. The air grew heavy, the road stretching endlessly, as if time itself had warped to trap us in its grip. Our stubbornness pushed us deeper, defying the rising dread. We kept following the road even after that, because we were stubborn and didn't know when to admit defeat. It was at least half an hour. Besides, my 60-minute cassette tape had flipped twice over. 30 minutes of music on each side between pulling on the paved roads and coming to a sign saying "Dirt Road Ahead." By this stage, I felt physically sick and my skin was crawling. Without a word, I did the quickest three-point turn I was able to and head back down the road. The dirt road sign loomed like a final warning, its letters blurred by my nausea. The cassette's loops, a lifeline of normalcy, seemed to mock our predicament as the car lurched in the turn. My friend clutched her seat, her breath shallow, the road's pull weakening only as we neared the turnoff. The relief was palpable, a rush of air filling my lungs, but the memory of that suffocating dread lingered. The experience left an indelible mark, a cautionary tale we couldn't shake. The closer we got to the turnoff, the better I felt, until we were back on the main road where I felt like I could breathe easily again. We told a few people about it and got brushed off by most. We didn't even drive past that turnoff without flinching or shuddering for a few months. The feeling of dread had been that strong. Then she turns to me out of nowhere and says, "Let's drive it during the day." So we went. My friend has both her phone and mine on her lap with the emergency numbers punched in, and we're playing upbeat pop music trying to keep us calm. It took us less than 5 minutes to reach the dirt road, and on checking the odometer, the paved section was only 1 kilometer long. Once again, we got the hell out of there and have never been back. No idea what the hell was going on that night, but I can say with certainty that we were not meant to be there. The daylight drive, armed with phones and music, did little to dispel the unease. The kilometers stretching into an eternity of tension, even years later. If someone mentioned the area of the signpost, we shudder. And recently, I turned to her out of nowhere and said, "Hey, was that you with me on the road where?" "Yes, and I don't want to talk about it." She'll reply, the shared silence. A pact born of fear binds us to that night, a mystery of intent, coincidence, or curse that haunts our every glance at that forsaken turnoff. Story number 7, The Silent Alarm. You're in a classroom surrounded by kids, their laughter filling the air. It's just another day, safe and routine, until a siren splits the quiet. A voice crackles over the speaker, cold and urgent, and your world shrinks to one word: danger. The lights are off, the door locked, and you're crammed into a tiny space with 5 small bodies pressed against you. Their eyes are wide, their breaths shallow, and you're supposed to keep them calm. But your own heart is screaming, Something's out there, and it's coming closer. Footsteps echo in the hall, slow and deliberate. Pausing outside your door, you hold your breath, praying they move on, praying this isn't real. Your phone is dead, your voice gone, and all you can do is wait, trapped in a moment that feels like forever. Minutes crawl by, each one heavier than the last, until silence returns. You reach for answers, for safety. But what you find is worse than fear. It's betrayal. The truth cuts deeper than any threat, and you'll never feel safe in these walls again. Because some alarms aren't just warnings, they're scars, carved into your soul. You'll leave this place, but the fear will follow, whispering in the quiet, reminding you how close you came to losing everything. I was a tutor for an elementary school where I would pull out advanced reads and conduct a book club sort of thing to spark a love for stories in kids who were ahead of their peers. My name was Riley, a college kid trying to make a difference. This was around the time when school shootings were getting really rampant in the U.S., and the fear was always there, a shadow in the back of my mind. I'm there alone with 5 third graders in an empty classroom, their voices bright as we laughed over a book, joking around and having book club in the empty classroom I was allowed to use. Then it happened. A siren blared, sharp and relentless, cutting through our chatter. All of a sudden, an alarm goes off and an announcement is made that there is an active shooter on campus and that we must lock our doors and conduct active shooter protocols. My stomach dropped, my mind a blur of panic. This can't be real. Not here, not now. I lose my mind. I herded the kids, 5 small, wide-eyed faces, toward a storage closet near the back. I usher the students into a little coke closet out of the view of the door, lock the door, and flick off the lights. We squeezed in, books scattered on the floor, the air thick with fear. To make it worse, me being a stupid college student at the time, I never had my phone charged. My phone was at 3, barely enough for a few desperate texts. I send as many texts to loved ones as I can, trying to not alarm them, but letting them know I love them and something is happening at work. Before the screen went black, my phone dies. The kids were trembling, their whispers fading as I hushed them. My own hands shaking. Keep them safe. You have to keep them safe. Then we heard it. Footsteps, heavy and slow, just outside the door. I hear footsteps outside of the door and quite literally stop breathing, my lungs burning, my body frozen. The steps paused, lingered, then moved on. They go past. No shots, no screams, just silence. But it wasn't comforting. I don't hear any shot or anything. The kids clung to me, their small hands gripping my sleeves, and I whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep. It's okay, we're okay. Time dragged, each second a weight on my chest. Another half hour passes and I realized I'd missed something obvious. I realized I should call the front office to see if they have any updates. My panic had blinded me to the classroom phone on the wall. My brain goes stupid during emergencies, apparently, and I forgot that classrooms have built-in phones during my panic. I crept out, dialed the office, my voice barely steady. I say something like, "Hi, I'm a tutor here, and I have 5 students with me in room Y. Is it safe to come out? Are the police here?" The woman on the line paused, her tone casual, almost bored. The woman doesn't answer for a little, and his dead ass says, "Oh, we didn't make an all-clear announcement. The drill is over." It was a drill. I was so close to tears. I just hung up. My knees buckled, relief and rage crashing over me. Then an announcement was made that the drill is over. No one had told me, an outside contractor, that this was a practice run. Nobody thought it would be important to let an outside school contractor know about a drill that very well could have been real. I felt betrayed, exposed, like the school had played a cruel joke on me and those kids. I swear I could have wet myself. We emerged from the closet, the kids blinking in the sudden light, their faces pale but brave. I hugged them, sent them back to their books, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. They didn't know. They thought we were safe all along. I quit soon after, unable to walk those halls without hearing that siren, those steps. Some fears don't leave you, no matter how many times you're told it's not real. I don't work in schools anymore. Don't trust alarms that sound too real. That day changed me, taught me how fragile safety is, how quickly it can slip away. I keep my phone charged now, check exits in every room, listen for sounds that don't belong, and sometimes, in the quiet, I hear that siren again, feel those kids' hands in mine, and wonder how close we came to something I can't name. Story number 8, the hidden vein of the main mansion. The mansion was too vast, its silence a secret waiting to crack. 10 friends sprawled across the 8,000 square foot vacation home in Maine, laughter echoing through its grand halls. But the walls held something more, something old and unspoken. Nate, the host, grinned as he led them through the sprawling estate, but his eyes flickered with unease. A creak sounded from the bathroom, not pipes, but deliberate, like a door to the past swinging open. The group froze, their chatter dying, as Nate whispered, "There's something you need to see." The bathroom vanity hid a trapdoor, its edges worn by time. Nate knelt, prying it open to reveal a dark, narrow tunnel snaking beneath the house. The air from below was stale, heavy with dust and forgotten years. One by one, they peered into the void, flashlights cutting through the gloom. This wasn't just a passage. It was a vein, pulsing with the house's hidden history. Their excitement turned to dread as the tunnel's walls seemed to tighten, daring them to enter. They couldn't resist. Ethan, the boldest, crawled in first, his flashlight bobbing in the dark. The passage was tight, its wooden beams groaning under his weight, as if protesting the intrusion. The others followed, their breaths loud in the confined space. Halfway through, Ethan stopped, his voice low. "There's something carved here. Names, dates, old." The group fell silent, their beams catching faded etchings, some ending in scratches, as if clawed in desperation. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them to army crawl, their elbows scraping raw. The air grew thinner, the darkness thicker, pressing against their chests. A faint hum vibrated through the walls, not mechanical, but alive, like a heartbeat from the house itself. Lila, at the rear, whispered, "We shouldn't be here." Her words hung unanswered, as the passage seemed to shift, guiding them deeper into the unknown. Nate's voice cracked, urging them on, but his confidence was gone, swallowed by the tunnel's grip. The end was a closet, its wooden seat hiding a secret latch. They emerged, gasping, into a dim space. the air thick with the scent of old wood and mildew. The walls were lined with shelves, holding jars of clouded glass, their contents obscured. A single name was carved above the seat: Eleanor, 18. The group stood frozen, their flashlights trembling as the hum grew louder, now a whisper calling them to stay. They fled, hearts pounding, the mansion's silence louder than ever. We once found in one buddy's vacation home in Maine a secret passage. The discovery thrilled them. A hidden game in Nate's sprawling estate. There were 10 of us, and the house was like 8,000 square foot. Its grandeur was overwhelming, but the passage was its true heart. The secret passage started under a sink and a bathroom vanity and went all the way across the house into a closet-type deal. The tunnel connected the house's wings, a secret artery built for reasons unknown, that had a wooden seat/box thing where you'd push on a random knot in the wood grain and it would undo the latch. Nate's father had crafted it, a puzzle for his children, but the passage felt older. Its purpose, darker. If you crawled into the vanity, you could sit up with some room to spare enough room for 2 people to sit facing each other cross-legged. The starting point was deceptively spacious, lulling them into a false sense of safety. As you crawled closer to the other end, the wooden box end, you had to army crawl. It was very dark, and it got progressively narrower and was super weird. The group's initial thrill faded as the tunnel tightened, their flashlights barely piercing the oppressive dark. We jammed everyone in and explored, their voices echoing off the walls. It could have been a panic room, I suppose, but just connected the 2 wings of the house. Yet the carvings, the jaws, the name Eleanor suggested something more. A refuge, a prison, a tomb. Nate's father later revealed his playful intent. His dad had actually built it and wanted to see how long it would take for his kids to find it. But the group's discovery unearthed more than he'd planned. The mansion had been built over an older foundation. Its history tied to a family that vanished in the 1890s. Eleanor, the matriarch, was said to have hidden her wealth, her secrets, and perhaps herself in the house's depths. The carvings, names of her children, servants, and dates, ended abruptly, as if the passage had swallowed them. The group avoided the bathroom after that night. The mansion felt different. Its halls too long, its shadows too deep. They searched for Eleanor's story, finding only fragments in local archives. A fire, a scandal, a family erased. The hum lingered in their dreams, a call to return to the passage. Lila refused to stay another night, her hands trembling as she packed. Ethan kept the carving's image, a name scratched out as if to erase its owner. Years later, Nate sold the mansion, but the passage haunted them. The new owners sealed the trapdoor, but the hum persisted, faint, carried through the walls. Locals spoke of Eleanor's ghost, not vengeful, but searching, forever bound to her hidden vein. The group never spoke of it again, but each felt marked, as if the passage had claimed a piece of them. The main mansion stood silent, its secrets buried but never gone. Story number 9, The Gray Watcher. The forest around the summer camp wasn't just dark. It pulsed, as if the trees themselves were breathing, watching. At 11, Eli joined a Christian camp, his first taste of adventure away from home. The night was alive with crickets, but something heavier hung in the air, unspoken. It was nighttime, and one of the counselors decided it would be the perfect time to play Capture the Flag. Eli was assigned as goalie, guarding his team's flag with pride. I was set up as the goalie. He tagged out rivals with a grin, the thrill of the game warming the chilly night. I did manage to tag out some of the other teams as they were attempting to steal our flag, but as the game dragged on, the forest grew quiet, the players vanishing into the shadows. After a while, though, no one was showing up to steal my team's flag, and I was starting to get bored. Eli paced, his flashlight cutting through the mist, the flag swaying in the breeze. I started pacing around the goal, keeping a close eye on it, and that's when I saw something. A shape emerged, not an animal, not a person, but a gray mass, fluid yet solid, taller than any man. It didn't move like an animal and didn't seem to have a solid form. Its eyes formed first, glowing like embers, followed by arms and legs stretching impossibly long. I can tell you that it was gray. Unlike smoke, had come to life and formed eyes, arms, and legs. The thing loomed, dwarfing the counselor's 6-foot frame, its presence crushing Eli's courage. The thing stood taller than my camp counselor, who was a dude standing at 6'1". His scream echoed as he fled, the flag forgotten. Needless to say, my 11-year-old brain said this thing would eat me, and I ran to my counselor. Was this a trick of the night, or had he glimpsed something ancient guarding the camp? Eli's fear didn't fade with the sunrise. It grew, rooting itself in the whispers of the camp. We lost the game because of this, and the counselor did report it to the site manager the next day. The counselor, shaken, relayed Eli's story, but the manager dismissed it as childish panic. Now, some people have said that it was everything from an owl to a bear to a raccoon and even a bobcat. Eli knew better. No animal moved like that gray thing, fluid yet deliberate. I've actually worked with ours since then, so I know it wasn't that. He'd grown up around raccoons, seen bears lumber, and studied bobcats, none matched. I grew up around raccoons, and bears don't move like this thing was moving. The thing was too tall, too otherworldly. Bobcats, well, it was way too tall to be one. Eli dove into research, poring over animal guides and paranormal lore, debunking countless claims. I have, in fact, educated myself on all sorts of animals since, just because of this experience. Yet, nothing explained the Gray Watcher, even debunked a whole load of paranormal activity just from doing this kind of research. And yet, I've never come across anything that would debunk what I saw that night. The camp's older counselors shared hushed tales of a guardian spirit tied to the land before the camp was built, a protector or punisher summoned by trespassers. Eli found carvings on the camp's oldest trees, symbols like the Watcher's eyes, etched deep and weathered. The flag's spot was no random field. It was a clearing, ringed by stones that hummed under his touch. His dreams replayed the encounter, but now the Watcher spoke, its voice a rasp of wind, warning him to leave. Years later, Eli returned as a counselor, finding the clearing unchanged, the air still heavy. The camp's records hinted at missing campers, their names scratched out, linked to that field. Eli never played Capture the Flag again, but at night, he felt eyes, gray, unblinking, watching from the trees. Had he disturbed a guardian, or was the Watcher something darker, waiting for its next trespasser. Story number 10, The Curse of Robert. Some things you laugh at can hear you. The glow of my phone screen was the only light in my room, casting sharp shadows across the walls. My fingers flew across the keyboard, trading messages with a friend I'd never met in person. I had met one of my now really good friends on the internet, a girl whose words felt like home despite the miles between us. I am in Alabama, and she is from Washington State. Our chats were a lifeline, a mix of teenage nonsense and late-night secrets. But tonight, the air felt heavier, like the world was listening. Ever joke about something you shouldn't? We were reckless, fearless in the way only 15-year-olds can be. We started discussing paranormal things and whether we believed in them or not. Ghosts, curses, haunted objects. It was all a game, a thrill to poke at the unknown. We were young teens, around 15 or so, too young to take it seriously. We brought up the topic of Robert the Doll, the infamous Florida bootbay with button eyes and a sailor suit, discussed his origins, his eerie history of moving, whispering, cursing those who disrespected him. We giggled, imagining his tiny feet scuttering across a floor. Some names carry power you don't expect. Our texts grew bolder, each message daring the other to go further. We started poking fun at him, mocking the idea of a doll causing chaos. We'd made remarks about it being comical, seeing him run around through the windows if he lived next door, his straw-stuffed limbs flailing. How scared we'd be, even if he were locked in the attic, his glassy gaze peering through the cracks, as I believe that's where they said he was put at one time. The story said he'd been banished there, locked away to keep his mischief contained. His footsteps would have thrown us into sheer panic. We typed, laughing through our fear. What happens when the joke stops being funny? We pushed further, our bravado unstoppable. We kept laughing about him and making comments about how we'd stop him if he haunted us. We'd trap him in a box, we said, or toss him in a river. The screen flickered, a glitch I barely noticed. Then it happened. My phone started messing up. The text blurred, her words vanishing into static. We were texting all of this back and forth, and my screen started blanking out her text. I typed frantically, telling her I couldn't see her messages. Right as I'm typing my text, I tell her I wasn't able to see her messages. A reply broke through. A message from her actually comes through saying that her phone was messing up. Her screen was glitching too, freezing, restarting. Some warnings come too late. My room felt colder, the shadows sharper. We were very frightened and immediately apologized to Robert. I typed the words, my fingers trembling, begging for forgiveness from a doll halfway across the country. It honestly seems crazy, him being in Florida and us being in two completely different states. The screens stabilized, her texts returning, but the fear lingered. I really feel like Robert didn't take too kindly to our teenage stupidity and reached through the wires. A warning to stop, and we did. We swore off his name, our laughter replaced by silence, the kind that knows it's been heard. The incident wasn't just a glitch. Every time I thought of Robert, my skin prickled like eyes were on me from a distance. My friend and I avoided paranormal talk for weeks, our chats sticking to safer ground. School, music, anything but him. But the memory clung, sharp and unyielding. I started noticing things, my phone lagging at odd moments, a faint hum in my earbuds when no music played. I told myself it was nothing, but doubt gnawed at me. Was he really listening, or was it just teenage guilt twisting my mind? I dug into Robert's story, needing answers. The doll, housed in a Florida museum, was infamous, linked to accidents, illnesses, eerie events for those who mocked him. Visitors had to ask permission to photograph him or face his wrath. The idea of a doll reaching across states felt insane, but so did our phones failing in unison. I found forums, stories of others who'd laughed at him and paid a price, crashed computers, flickering lights, dreams of a small figure in a sailor suit. Each tale felt like a mirror, reflecting our own fear. My friend and I eventually talked about it again, our voices cautious. Every 6 months, when I bring it up again, she'd tense, her words clipped. She'd had her own signs, texts sent in twice, her phone buzzing with no notifications. We both felt marked, like we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. I started leaving my phone face down at night, half expecting to see his name flash across the screen. The world felt bigger, stranger, like anything could reach you if it wanted to. Years later, I visited Florida, passing near the museum where Robert sat. I couldn't bring myself to go inside, my heart racing at the thought of facing him. I stood outside, staring at the building, wondering if he knew I was there. My phone stayed silent, but the air felt charged, like a storm waiting to break. I whispered an apology, just in case. My voice lost in the wind. My friend still checks in, and we never joke about him now. Some things you learn to respect, even if you don't understand them. Robert's shadow lingered, a lesson carved in fear. I don't know if he's real, if he hurt us, or if it was all coincidence. But I know the chill I felt, the way our phones betrayed us. Some names you don't say lightly, some doors you don't open. We stopped, but I still wonder if he did. Every glitch, every flicker makes me pause, waiting for a sign that he's still watching. Story number 11. The figure on the factory road. The road was empty, but the night was not. Driving through Sydney's industrial heart to catch a flight, I gripped the wheel, my boyfriend beside me, the city's pulse fading behind us. I was driving through a factory area to get to the airport. The 4-lane road cut through a maze of silent factories, unlit and desolate, no other cars in sight. It was still dark, and there were no other cars on the road. The darkness swallowed our headlights, casting fleeting shadows across rusted warehouses. Something waited in the void, and it wasn't asleep. The figure emerged, and fear took hold. A massive silhouette appeared, stepping casually across the lanes, towering and deliberate. A huge, tall figure just start to casually walk across the 4 lanes. Our headlights caught him, revealing a man who slowed, his glare piercing through the windshield. As we drove closer, our lights shined on him, and he slowed down even more and just glared at us. My boyfriend shouted, braking hard, the car nearly stalling. My boyfriend yelled out loud as he rolled to an almost complete stop. His eyes had locked on us, and the air turned cold. The tattoos spoke, and menace grew. As my eyes adjusted, I saw the swastika tattoo on his shoulder, stark among others. His combat boots and camo pants, a uniform of threat, fists clenched tight. As my eyes focused on the man crossing the road, I noticed the swastika tattoo on his shoulder among others, the combat boots, the camo pants, and his hands were bowled into fists. His confidence chilled me. His slow turn to stare as we crept closer, radiating violence. It was bloody terrifying, and the way he confidently slowed down and turned to stare at us as we drove towards him. He wasn't just crossing, he was claiming the road. The silence lingered, and shock settled. We drove on, hearts pounding, the figure fading into the dark, but his presence clung like damp fog. It took a good 5 minutes before we spoke about it. Words came haltingly. The reality sinking in, such a man existed here in our city, not a myth from a screen. It was just so unsettling, and the first time it ever dawned on me that people like that lived in my city. His fearless gaze suggested a capacity for causeless harm, unshaken. The road stretched on, but he owned it still. The memory haunts and eyes remain. The airport's lights offered no comfort. The man's stare followed us, a specter in our mutts. I still feel extreme shock about this whole thing when I realized he was for real, and his confidence was terrifying. I'd never imagined such people near my home, their existence a jolt to my sense of safety. The factory road hides him, but I'll never forget his gaze. Every dark drive now carries his shadow, a reminder of the violence lurking closer than I thought. Story number 12, Shadows of the Ancient Dorm. The boarding school rose like a timeless relic, its aged walls hiding truths no student should uncover, its windows glinting under the night's pale glow, casting shadows that danced with a life of their own. I stepped into the dorm, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, or something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my name. The hallway stretched, its floors warping as if the school itself was bending time, its edges alive with a pulse I couldn't name. I was no stranger to new beginnings, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth that pulsed in the dark. The stairs creaked, their wood groaning as I moved, their sound a rhythm that stirred in the silence, a rhythm that wasn't mine. The mirror by the desk glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on my bag, but the faces were gone, the mirror empty, the silence heavier. The school wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. I ventured deeper, the dorm stretching ahead, its walls bending, as if the building was watching, waiting. The moonlight flickered, its beams warping into patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my mind, a weight that followed me. The school wasn't mine. It belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. The night deepened, the dorm's pulse a drumbeat under my steps, its silence a predator. I carried my curiosity, a frail shield against the unknown, but the rooms disagreed, their corners alive with mystery. I was a witness, a newcomer, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The wind murmured, the school a canvas of lives spent and lulled, its walls holding echoes of those who'd studied here. I was no stranger to learning, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The dorm was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me. I was attending this boarding school that was over 175 years old. I was entering 6th grade and moving into the dormitories above the school infirmary. On the first night when settling in, I was by my desk and looked out the window to see this really young boy, pale and glowing. What was strange was that he had a cape tied to his neck, slick hair with a short-sleeve button-up shirt, shorts, and bowling shoes. I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me since he wasn't too far from the street light. The school's pulse was a spark, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the glass. The school's shadows deepened as I gazed, the window's pulse a drumbeat under my hands. But the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my wonder, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, dust, something older, something that clung to the walls, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the room. The dorm wasn't just a space, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the view stretching, its edges warping as if the school was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror by the bed glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the sill, but the faces were gone, the mirror empty, the silence heavier. The school wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The night loomed ahead, its glass shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in halls, footsteps on stairs, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The moonlight danced, its glow bending as if the dorm was warping. I stepped back, the desk a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too olive, as if the school was watching, waiting. The night was a wait, its walls a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd studied. I was a witness, a newcomer, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The darkness filtered through the pain, but the school disagreed, its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to rooms, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The dorm was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. As I'm looking at him, he looks up at me, waves, and walks away while vanishing into the night. I told my roommates, and they laugh at me. Fast forward in time. I'm now in the 9th grade and was going to this alumni event where we talk to alumni and look at memorabilia. I'm going through old Lettermans, baseball leagues, and other things on display when I come across an old picture of the same young boy with a friend. The school's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the photo. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others. Faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. I could recognize him immediately because he looked exactly like the same ghost that I saw a few years back. The picture was taken during Halloween, which explains the cape. I was so shaken up about it, I had to leave the event for a moment. According to one alumni, the little boy died in a flu outbreak in the infirmary that killed a lot of students in the early 1900s. His friend also, in the photo, survived, graduated, and donated the photo along with other tokens to the collection. The school pulse was a weight. Its shadows, a truth that lingered in my mind, a truth that followed me to the exit. The school's shadows followed me as I fled. The hall's pulse, a drumbeat under my feet, but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my shock, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, dust, something older, something that clung to the walls, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the floor. The dorm wasn't just a space, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the exit stretching, its edges warping, as if the school was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror by the door glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the frame, but the faces were gone, the mirror empty, the silence heavier. The school wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The corridor loomed ahead, its shadows deepened, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in halls, footsteps on stairs, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The moonlight danced, its glow bending as if the dorm was warping. I stepped back, the hall, a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the school was watching, waiting. The night was awake, its walls a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd studied. I was a witness, a newcomer, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. But the darkness filtered through the glass, but the school disagreed. Its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to events, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The dorm was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. The school's shadows lingered as I reflected. The room's pulse a drumbeat in my chest, but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my unease, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, dust, something older, something that clung to the walls, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the floor. The dorm wasn't just a space, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the desk stretching, its edges warping as if the school was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror by the window glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on my book, but the faces were gone, the mirror empty, the silence heavier. The school wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The night loomed ahead, its corners shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in halls, footsteps on stairs, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The moonlight danced, its glow bending as if the dome was warping. I stepped back, the room a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the school was watching, waiting. The night was a wait, its walls a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd studied. I was a witness, a newcomer, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The darkness filtered through the pain, but the school disagreed, its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to history, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The dorm was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. The school's shadows followed me as I moved on. The campus's pulse, a drumbeat under my feet. But the delegates was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my thoughts, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Stone, dust, something older, something that clung to the memory, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the path. The dorm wasn't just a space, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the grounds stretching, its edges warping as if the school was blinking, watching, waiting. The mirror by the gate glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on my bag. But the faces were gone, the mirror empty, the silence heavier. The school wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The path loomed ahead, its shadows deepened, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in halls, footsteps on stairs, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow bending as if the dorm was warping. I stepped back. The yard, a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the school was watching, waiting. The morning was a wait, its walls a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd studied. I was a witness, a newcomer, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The daylight filtered through the trees, but the school disagreed. Its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to learning, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The dorm was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark, a mystery I carried forward. I have heard many ghost stories about spirits who pass through and haunt the old dorms. Also, many of the buildings are basically relics. So I'm surprised that I didn't see more ghosts on campus. The school's pulse was a weight, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me beyond the walls. The school was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't unsee. Story number 13, the tunnel beneath the town. The basement's dust stirred, whispering of buried paths. Boards groaned, revealing a passage into the dark. Shadows clung to the walls, heavy with untold tales. Footsteps echoed above, unaware of secrets below. Some homes stand on truths that lead to freedom's edge. As a kid, in a small western New York town, an hour south of Rochester, I explored my friend's basement with him, a dim space where no one went, its corners piled with forgotten things. We found a boarded-up tunnel, hidden behind a cord of wood, its boards nailed tight like a sealed window, masking a hole stretching 30 feet beneath the house toward the main street. We pried the boards free, driven by curiosity, revealing a narrow passage, its air damp and heavy with earth. The hum rose, a pulse in the dark. As we stared into the void, its depths calling us to uncover what lay beyond. We asked his parents about it, and they revealed it was a link to the Underground Railroad, a secret route for escaped slaves heading to Buffalo and Canada. Our research at the town library confirmed it, uncovering tales of a network of tunnels beneath the town. Our friend's house atop one pathway, the tunnel's purpose, a lifeline for freedom, awed us. Its history etched in the soil. We traced its path in our minds, imagining fugitive steps, their fear and hope woven into the earth. The hum pulsed, the boards grained my mirror, the tunnel's weight a truth that bound us to the past. The library's records spoke of safe houses, their hidden doors shielding lives, but no map survived. The tunnel's a secret kept by few. A 1850s journal hinted at a guide. His path a ritual, his dark a vow. The hum named him glyphs, faint, organic, warm on my skin. The pages marking us, a keeper of escapes. His tunnel a gate, I'll find his legacy. I checked shadows, fearing its pull, the earth's chill my scar. We left the basement untouched, but the tunnel's hum clung, the street's pulse my fate, a maze of unseen journeys that reshaped our quiet town. The hum was my echo, our lives a frail shield against the tunnel's call, the boarded hole, its hidden reach. Stirred me still, his parents' words a wound in my soul. We learned its truth, but the underground shadow, its silent paths, haunted me. The hum a vow I couldn't break. The house was his, its basement a shrine, the town's earth his kingdom. Claiming all who knew, I felt his steps, the guide's march eternal, the hum a pulse that scripted my awe. I hid, dreams restless, nights tracing paths unseen, but the hum sang, predicting my breaths. The tunnel's damp in every shadow, the library's dust, its ancient tales, glowed in my sleep. The boards creak my air. I burned my questions, fearing its depths, but the glyph, warm, organic, spread on my skin, my walls, my eyes, a mark of his claim. The street's hum its hidden veins pulsed in every balance. The journal's ink my mirror. I scoured tales, tunnels lost, freedoms won, no end. A 1840s log spoke of a sentinel, his path a prayer, his dark a gift. The hum named him, its glyphs a road, his silence a gate, my wonder his song. I fled forward, chasing history, but the hum roared, the glyphs a tide, the basement's chill in every dawn. The tunnel choked me, its earth in every shadow, the holes dark my noose. I burned my past, fearing his gaze, but the hum kept him, the sentinels march my breath. I ran to fields, towns, but the paths called, the hum a broadcast. You're his, my eyes glowed, the glyphs my scar, my life a ritual he wove. The parent and's tale burned in my dreams, the town's hum my fate, his tunnel my end. One night the hum surged, a shadow in my window, eyes unseen, earth on hands. I froze, hands still watching, his shadow fading, dissolving into the dark. The hum was me, its glyphs my blood, the basement my world. He's waiting, his path a hymn, his silence a void where time dies. I write to resist, but the hum scripts my words, its glyphs my chain, his dark my end, the tunnel beneath the town, claiming me forever in the night. Story number 14. The upper school dorm rose in a heavy silence, its aged walls exhaling a damp chill that clung to my skin as I approached, the air thick with an unspoken tension. The narrow halls twisted into shadows that seemed to writhe with intent. And a shiver ran through me, not from the night, but from an unseen presence. The other students' voices faded, leaving me isolated. A force lingered, its intent threading through the stillness, marking me as a target in this haunted lair. The room's creaky floorboards impulsed with a weight that made my breath catch as I settled in, the air growing heavier with each passing moment. I paused. The quiet too perfect, too still, and my heart thudded with a dread I couldn't name. My pulse raced as the silence warped, a faint pressure settling on my chest, a sensation that carried a threat. The isolation of the dorm's upper floor, cut off from help, amplified my unease. No allies, no escape, just me and the entity stirring within the walls. Something was near, its presence a haunt I couldn't ignore. I lay in bed, the mattress sinking under an invisible weight, when a sensation gripped me, a pull, a weight that dragged my body into stillness. The air thickened, and a suffocating force pinned me down, making my chest tighten with fear. My breath caught as I struggled, the room a stage for a spectral grip, the darkness a witness to my paralysis. The dorm was no longer a refuge. It had become a prison, and the haunt was drawing me into its hold. The night turned chaotic, the air turning cold. A void settling as the door creaked open. The patter of footsteps, the slam behind her, made my hand shake as I imagined her terror. The entity's presence a weight I couldn't lift. My heart pounded as I heard the tale. The hallway a battleground, the unseen force driving the panic. The challenge was a nightmare, and the haunt pulled me into a horror I couldn't escape. The aftermath left a chilling echo, the air pulsing with an unnatural chill as the furniture blocked the door. The unexplained movement, The watcher's gaze mocked her safety, and my breath came in gasps as I recalled the story. My pulse raced as I avoided the room, the dorm a scar on my school days. The building had turned against her, and the haunt's shadow lingered, a mystery etched in every creak of the upper school. I went to boarding school, so there were a number of creepy things I heard about at the school. First off, the junior and senior boy dorm is called the upper school. And in the early part of the 20th century, a student decided to take their own life in the room there. Since then, the dorm has definitely been haunted. The experiences grew eerie. There's actually a challenge to stay in the upper school alone for a whole night in the room where he took his life. In any case, a number of strange things have happened. I know a number of people who've lived in that room who said they've woken up in the middle of the night, usually at 3 a.m., completely conscious, but unable to move. They've all described it as if someone were laying on top of you. The lone night turned terrifying. There's only one person I know of, though, who's attempted to stay in the upper school alone. She went to bed as normal until suddenly waking up at 3 a.m. to hear a door open and close and the pit-patter of footsteps down the hall. Thinking someone was playing a prank on her, she opened the door and looked out into the hall. Of course, no one was there, so she went back to sleep. The encounter escalated to panic. Later, she again woke with the distinct feeling that someone was watching her. She heard the door open and the footsteps in the hall. This time she went out into the hall. When she got outside the room, the door slammed shut behind her. And absolutely terrified, she booked it out. The aftermath left a haunting riddle. When her and a faculty member went back the next day, they couldn't open the door because all the furniture had been pushed against the door. The dorm's silence became a prison. The suicide's legacy, the pinned-down nights, the slammed door all wove a tale of a haunt that clung to the upper school's shadows. The footsteps, the furniture's shift, hinted at a restless spirit, a danger I couldn't unravel. I avoided the room, but the unease lingered, a scar on my school life. The dorm had turned hostile, and the haunt's shadow haunted every night in its halls. The challenge fueled my dread. The paralysis tales, the watcher's gaze, marked a presence I couldn't dismiss. The prank theory, the empty hall, painted a picture of doubt. The entity a thread I couldn't follow. I listened in panic, my heart racing. The bed a cage of fear. The haunt was a warning, and its pull dragged me into a relief tempered by terror. The aftermath reshaped my peace. The blocked door, the unanswered cause, offered no closure. The spirit's intent, a question that gnawed at me. The faculty's search, the student's flight, suggested a haunted past, a threat survived by luck. I shared the tale, a caution to others, the dorm a mirror to vigilance. The haunt remained, a scar on my soul, a whisper of the unknown etched in the upper school's silence. Story number 15, The Toys Stare. You drift to sleep on a quiet couch, the air thick with a stillness that isn't calm. A gaze you can't escape, not the hum of a TV or the rustle of blankets, but a silence that hides movement. In 3 minutes, you'll wake to eyes that follow, a toy with a will of its own. This isn't a tale of ghostly shadows or creaking floors. It's a confrontation with the inanimate turned alive. What if the plaything you love turned hunter in the night, rest in the dim glow? where innocence meets dread. The shadows were my norm, but this stood out. At 17, I've seen faint shadows and heard odd sounds, but one memory haunts me. I'm a 16-year-old female and usually don't experience more than seeing a few shadows, a few sounds in the house, here and there, the basic stuff. But I do have one story that I have never been able to explain. As a child, I lived with my mom in her old house, likely for 6. Yet, I don't even remember exactly when it occurred. I don't remember what age I was at the time. But it was during the time I was living with my mom at my mama's old house. So I must have been about 5 or 6. The TV's light framed all my fear. I was fast asleep on the couch one night. The small 2000s TV was on and was staticky and bright. I woke to a stare. A toy, alive. Something roused me, and I saw my Teletubby toy on the coffee table, eyes opening with mine. I was asleep on the couch, and I sensed something was in front of me, which caused me to wake up. When I woke up, I saw one of my tissues standing in front of me on the coffee table, just staring at me. It chased me as I fled to my mom's bed. As soon as it opened its eyes, I ran to my mom's room and jumped on the bed. These toys can't walk. But the thing was chasing me. It couldn't climb, but hid below. When I got onto the bed, it tried to follow but couldn't. Instead, it crawled under my bed. The morning brought loss. A mystery deepened. My cat lay stiff, the toy gone. The next morning, I got up to see if the toy was still under the bed. I couldn't see it, but one of my cats and some wooden boards was stacked underneath. I reached in to pet my cat, and he was stiff. His frozen face haunted me. My cat had his mouth and eyes wide open in a natural, relaxed position, sitting his head up as if he had no time to scream. And then he was just frozen in place. The toy vanished. A shadow lingered. The toy was nowhere to be seen. I haven't seen that toy in years. My mom's past echoed mine. She recalled a glowworm, a sibling's bite. A few years after the incident, I told my mom quite a few times, but each time she seemed to not remember until a few months ago. My mother has had the exact same thing happen to her as a child with a glowworm toy. Her evidence shifted my fear. She said that she had evidence, though she wasn't the only one to see it. She had a sibling who was with her at the time that it happened to, and her brother had actually been bitten by the thing. I wonder my fate, missing my cat. It makes me wonder what would have happened to me if I hadn't have had the instinct to run. I might have ended up like my cat. I still miss him. The Teletubby's stare remains, a question in my quiet nights. Story number 6, The Shadowed Expressway. The night stretched endlessly over the town, a deceptive calm, masking the perilous journey ahead on a road uncharted and foreboding. I set out with a friend's invitation to join his wife on a kayaking trip, the promise of adventure luring me onto a 2-lane expressway through a dense forest reserve. The hum of my car blended with the rustle of leaves, a rhythm that soon turned dissonant. As darkness swallowed the path, a chilling presence emerged, its eyes piercing the gloom, a sentinel of the wild I couldn't ignore. The winding road tightened its grip, each curve a step deeper into an unseen threat that gnawed at my resolve. Was it merely a trick of the night, or had I ventured into a domain where humans were unwelcome? The encounter with that towering figure and the lingering dread reshaped my nights. A haunting echo of a road that rejected my presence. What guarded that forest? And why did its gaze follow me home? I went to a kayaking trip that was a 5-hour drive away from my place. I was invited by my friend to accompany his wife. So I left quite late, but I predicted I would get there around 8 p.m. The campsite itself wasn't that secluded. It was by the river, behind a little town. But to get there, I had to use a 2-lane expressway that goes through a forest reserve. It was around 7 p.m. when I reached the expressway. But what I did not expect was how winding and dark the road was. A few solar road lights and some signs of beware the animals passing here and there. I was driving alone, and it was eerily quiet. The isolation amplifying every creak of the car. The forest loomed closer, its trees a wall of shadows, and the sparse lights cast fleeting glows that revealed more warnings than comfort. My mind raced with the anticipation of the campsite, unaware that the journey itself would become the story. The road's twists soon birthed an unease that defied explanation. As I navigated the bends, a figure emerged from the tree line, tall and unnatural, its silhouette blending with the night. My headlights caught its form, a shape too elongated to be human. Standing motionless as I approached, panic surged as its head turned, eyes glinting with an otherworldly sheen. Tracking my car with deliberate intent, I pressed the accelerator, the engine's roar, a feeble defiance against the silence that followed. The figure vanished around a curve, but the air grew thick, a weight pressing on my chest, as if the forest itself resented my intrusion. I gripped the wheel tighter, my breath shallow, the signs of animal crossings now seeming like markers of a territory I'd trespassed. Relief came only with distance, but the memory lingered like a scar. After what felt like an eternity, I reached the campsite, my friend and his wife greeting me with puzzled looks at my pale face. I recounted the figure, the glowing eyes, and the oppressive air, but they dismissed it as fatigue. Days later, a local campfire tale spoke of a forest guardian, a spirit bound to protect its domain from outsiders, its gaze a curse to those who lingered, determined to unravel the mystery. I returned with them by day, the drive swift and unremarkable, the road stretching just a kilometer before turning to dirt. Yet, the unease returned, a whisper in the wind, and we fled again. The experience haunts me still, a shadow on every drive, a question of intent, guardian or menace, that binds me to that shadowed expressway. Story number 18, The Vanishing Road. You're driving and the road feels alive. The rain taps your windshield. The headlights cut through the dark, but something's wrong. The cars around you are there one moment, gone the next, and the road stretches on, endless, empty, pulling you deeper into nowhere. The signs don't make sense. They warn of dangers that aren't there, guide you down paths that shouldn't exist. You grip the wheel, your heart pounding, because you're not just lost, you're alone, and the road knows it. Whispering secrets in the silence, you passed a van, you're sure of it. But now, it's gone, swallowed by the night. The bend you took was just a curve, but it changed everything. No headlights, no taillights, just you and the dark, and the feeling that something's watching from the trees. The radio crackles, the air grows colder, and you wonder if you're still on the map. The road narrows, the hills close in, and every mile feels like a step into a place you weren't meant to find. You're not driving anymore, you're being led. And when you see the lights of a town, the relief is sharp, but it doesn't last, because you know, deep down, that road isn't done with you. It's out there, waiting, ready to claim you again when you least expect it. Drizzling, but I wasn't too worried because the expressway was filled with cars moving in the same direction. A steady stream of headlights in the rain. My name was Alex, and I was just trying to get home. The wipers swiping rhythmically across my windshield. Because of that, the traffic was slower than the average speed. I wasn't thrilled about it. I'm not the most patient driver. I'm not a patient driver by any chances. Always looking for a gap to slip through. Any chances I have to pass the cars in front of me I took, weaving past sedans and trucks until I hit a wall, a van, chugging along at the head of the line. Until I get to this van at the end of the line, I hesitated, the rain slick on the road, the sky darkening. I decide maybe I should just stay behind the van to be safe since the road was getting dark. It felt like the smart move, but the cars behind me had other ideas. Then we reached the passing line. The cars behind me started to pass us. The van held steady, infuriatingly slow. The van maintained in slow speed. I counted, there were already 6 cars past us, and my patience snapped. So I ramped up and left the van. I hit the gas, the engine roaring as I pulled ahead, the van shrinking in my rear view. Then came the bend. There was a right bend. I took it, tires gripping the wet asphalt. And when I came out the other side, the world had changed. Once I got through it, I was alone on the road, no headlights behind me, no taillights ahead, just darkness, rain, and the hum of my engine. Where did they go? I waited for the cars behind me to come out from right behind the bend, but there was no one. I slowed, thinking I'd outrun them. I thought I was driving too fast, so I slowed down, but nothing appeared. Not even the van showed up. The road shifted, narrowing into a ravine, the hills looming on either side. Now I was driving through a ravine. A sign caught my headlights. Temporary. Crooked. The words stark. Drive slow. I saw a temporary signboard saying, drive slow. A few meters later, another landslide 100 ahead. Another signboard saying landslide 100 meters ahead. My stomach twisted. Is this road closed? What the hell is this road closed? I scanned for a turnoff, a detour, anything. I didn't see any alternate route on the way, and there was no junction. I crept forward, my speed barely a crawl, expecting rocks or mud to block the way. So I drove as slow as it could be, but there was nothing, no landslide, no debris, just the road, winding and empty. There was no landslide whatsoever, and still no sign of any vehicle on the road except mine. It was the most agonizing 10 minutes of my life. Driving through that narrow, twisting path, the world reduced to my headlights and the glow of my phone. Driving alone on a narrow, winding road in the middle of nowhere. The hills pressed in, the trees a wall of shadows, just hills and trees all around me, no light, but my car lamp in front of me and my phone screen. The silence was deafening, unnatural. It was eerily silent. I cranked the radio, desperate for noise, but it felt hollow, wrong. I put the volume of my car radio up, but I just didn't feel right. The air was freezing even with the AC off. It was so cold with the air conditioning turned off. Too, I wasn't alone. Not really. The road felt alive, like it was watching, guiding me somewhere I didn't want to go. My hands gripped the wheel, my eyes darting to the mirrors, expecting something, anything to appear. Where was the van? Where were the cars? I whispered to myself, trying to stay calm. But the dark was too heavy, the rain too relentless. Then a sign loomed ahead, a welcome sign at a left junction. I saw a welcome board at a left junction, turned left, and the world snapped back. Have never felt so relieved seeing random shop lots with people in them. Lights, voices, life, normalcy flooded in, sharp and sweet. But it didn't erase what happened. That road wasn't right. I don't drive that route anymore. Stick to main highways, keep my music low so I can hear what's coming. Some roads don't just take you places, they take something from you. I still see that bend in my dreams, the empty road stretching on, and I wonder where it led, what it wanted, because I know it's still out there, waiting for me to find it again. Story number 18, the Cypress Bay Lockdown. The school was a powder keg, ready to explode. At Cypress Bay, chaos was routine. Fights, scandals, and now a chilling announcement crackled over the intercom. Lockdown, this is not a drill. Freshman Lucas crouched in his classroom, heart hammering. As the teacher barred the door, the air was thick with fear. Every whisper a potential threat, rumors of a bomb, and worse, a gunman, spread like wildfire. This wasn't just a scare, it was a nightmare come to life. The classroom felt like a cage. Lucas pressed against the wall, his classmates' faces pale, eyes wide. Footsteps thundered outside, boots heavy, deliberate, not students. The SWAT team was here, their shadows flickering through the door's window. A dog's bark echoed, sharp and urgent, slicing through the silence. Lucas's mind raced. His house was a minute away, a sprint to safety. But the door was locked, the danger too close. Whispers grew desperate. A girl beside Lucas sobbed softly. Her phone clutched like a lifeline. "They found something," she hissed, scrolling through texts from friends in other buildings. The campus was massive, a maze of halls and portables, impossible to secure. Every creak of the building was a bomb ticking, every shadow a gunman lurking. Lucas's hands shook, his backpack heavy with useless textbooks, a reminder of the test he'd never take today. The lockdown dragged on, hours bleeding together. Lucas's legs cramped, his back aching against the cold wall. A muffled shout from the hall sent hearts racing. Orders, not screams, but the line was thin. The teacher's face was grim, her eyes darting to the door. Lucas wondered who could do this. Why Cypress Bay? Why now? The school's reputation, riots, leaks, chaos, made it a target, a stage for someone's twisted game. Hope was a fragile thing. The intercom buzzed again, the principal's voice strained but steady. All clear, but remain in place. The relief was fleeting. Whispers of a suspect, a student, someone they might know. Lucas's friend Ethan across the room mouthed, "It's fake, right?" But the fear in his eyes betrayed his doubt. The SWAT team's radios crackled outside, their presence a reminder that safety was an illusion, not a promise. To preface this, I'd like to say that my school is regularly featured on both national and local news and internet for the amount of ridiculous stuff that happens here. Cypress Bay was infamous, a headline factory of scandals and stunts, riot, food fights, incidents where the girls' nude pictures get spread, Cypress Bay, anyone, and finally a full-on bomb threat. This wasn't new, but it was different, deadly. My school has a fairly large campus, one large 2-story building comprising the entire arts, science, and sports departments, the lunchroom, and administration offices. Another 2 large story buildings that house the media center and hundreds of classrooms, followed by a third 3-story building and 50 portables. The sprawl made control impossible. A labyrinth where danger hid. This makes covering all school grounds time-consuming and very dangerous. The bomb threat turned that truth into a trap. So when there was a bomb threat in my freshman year, we were locked down for hours, the world outside a blur of fear and uncertainty, while the SWAT team scoured the building accompanied by police dogs and armed with M4s and 12-gauge shotguns. Lucas saw them through the window, their rifles glinting, dogs straining at leashes. We were told to sit against the wall on which the door was because there was also a report of a possible gunman. The instruction was chilling. The wall a flimsy shield. I was honestly terrified. Lucas's pulse raced, his every thought consumed by escape. I saw the police and SWAT team run through the bathrooms in front of our class, and Lucas's fear spiked. Their urgency a grim confirmation, and thoughts of running off campus into my house were inundating me. His home was so close, a 60-second dash across the street. But the lockdown held him fast. I lived in the neighborhood across the street, a 60-second dash that could get me to safety. Yet the risk was too great, the unknown too vast. Sighs. The truth emerged slowly, a bitter pill. In the end, they found out it was a fluke, and it was all staged by one kid that faked a bomb threat to avoid taking a test. The culprit was a classmate. His motive laughably petty. His consequences non-existent. Idiot didn't even get suspended. Lucas's fear turned to anger. Hours of terror for a prank, a test dodged at their expense. The SWAT team left. The dogs quieted, but the classroom silence lingered, heavy with betrayal. The aftermath was quiet but deep. Cypress Bay returned to its chaos. But the lockdown left scars. Lucas walked the halls differently, eyeing every shadow, every stranger. Classmates whispered about the kid, his name a curse, his stunt a legend. The school's reputation grew darker, its infamy a magnet for more trouble. Ethan stopped joking, his eyes wary, as if waiting for the next alarm. Lucas's dash home never happened, but the urge never left him. Years later, the lockdown haunted Lucas. The school's sprawl felt like a trap, its size a liability. He read about other threats, other schools, and wondered how many were flukes, how many weren't. The SWAT team's boots still echoed in his dreams, a reminder of how close danger came. Cypress Bay was just a school, but its chaos was a mirror, reflecting a world where safety was fleeting. And Lucas knew, deep down, the next alarm might not be a lie. Story number 19, the library's hidden doors. The library wasn't just a building, It was alive, its walls humming with secrets older than the city itself. Since Clara joined her class for a field trip to the Grand Central Library, a former mansion towering over the town, its chandeliers flickered like eyes, and the air carried a chill that clung to her skin. In my city, our big central library resides in a once huge mansion. Clara wandered, her sneakers squeaking on the polished wood, when she spotted something odd. I noticed scratch marks on the wood floor, swinging out of a knock from the wall. The marks arced from a wall of towering bookshelves, their spines gleaming with dust. The wall itself was a bunch of built-in bookshelves, and deduced there may be a secret room there. Her heart raced. This was like Clue, her favorite movie, come to life. It made me think of Clue, which was one of my favorite movies at the time. She tugged at her teacher's sleeve, pointing to the scratches. I asked the librarian, giving us the tour, and she revealed that there was a secret door there. The librarian, with a knowing smile, pulled a leather-bound book, and the shelf groaned, revealing a hidden door, which he opened for us by pulling a book out of one of the shelves. The class gasped as it swung open, exposing a narrow passage. It was like something you see in a movie. Clara stepped closer. The air beyond altered, heavier, as if it held a breath too long. It led to a small display room where they put a bunch of random pieces of art and sculpture. The room was dim, filled with strange statues and paintings, their eyes seeming to follow her. Apparently, there are a bunch of secret door rooms in the library, too. Was this just a quirky feature, or did the mansion hide something darker behind its doors? The hidden room wasn't just a display, it felt like a cage holding something that didn't want to be seen. Clara's classmates crowded in, their whispers echoing off the stone walls. But she couldn't shake the unease. The sculptures weren't random. Their twisted forms hinted at forgotten rituals, their surfaces etched with symbols she didn't understand. But I never returned to have a look through them. Though it would have been cool to do. The librarian ushered them out, her smile strained, warning them not to linger. Clara noticed a faint hum like a heartbeat, pulsing from deeper within the mansion. Back in the main hall, she overheard the librarian whisper to another about keeping the doors sealed. Her curiosity burned. She wanted to explore the other secret rooms, but the tour ended abruptly. That night, Clara dreamed of the library, its shelves starting to reveal endless corridors, each door pulsing with light. She woke, her sketchbook filled with drawings of the symbols she'd seen, drawn in her sleep years later as a teenager. Clara researched the mansion's history, uncovering tales of its first owner, a recluse who vanished after building the secret rooms. The library's records were incomplete, pages torn out, but whispers spoke of a pact to seal something beneath the mansion. Clara returned, sneaking in after hours, her flashlight catching glints of more scratch marks leading to new doors. One opened to a chamber with a single book, its pages blank but warm to the touch. The hum grew louder, the air thick with a presence that wasn't human. She fled, the door slamming shut behind her, but the symbols haunted her dreams. Had she stumbled upon a forgotten relic? Or was the library guarding a force that waited to be freed? Story number 20, the silent presence. Some things hide better than you do. The forest at camp was a labyrinth of shadows, its branches clawing at the scariest. The air was sharp with the scent of damp earth and pine, a world alive with secrets. I was a teenager and at a weekend camp, caught up in the thrill of the night. We were playing a flashlight tag game, a chaotic dance of light and laughter. I was running and hiding rather than seeking, my sneakers soft on the dirt, my heart racing with the joy of evasion. Ever feel eyes on you when you're sure you're alone? The younger kids squealed in the distance, their flashlights slicing through the dark. I had been sneaking around a lot, ducking behind trees, my breath shallow to stay unseen. Bailing into the bush if younger kids came near was my trick, a way to keep the game alive. It made it more fun if the leaders moved so the kids had more of a chance. I was good at this. A ghost in the woods, slipping through the undergrowth with ease. But the forest felt heavier tonight, its silence deeper than it should be. What's worse than hiding from kids? Hiding with something else? My pulse thrummed as a group closed in, their beams too close. I was just about caught by a group and jumped into an area of brush. Thorns snagged my jacket as I landed, crouched low. Then it came, a rustle, sharp and close. As soon as I landed, I heard someone else shift and heard their breathing. The sound was steady, deliberate, not a kid's quick gasps. My stomach twisted. I whispered, "Sorry, I didn't know you were here." No reply, just that breath, heavy and rhythmic, inches away. Silence can scream louder than words. I froze, my own breathing shallow, waiting for a response. They didn't answer. The kids' voices faded, their lights veering off. I waited for them for almost a minute in silence. Aside from hearing the breathing, it was too close, too real. A presence I couldn't see. My skin prickled, the air thick with something unspoken. I said to them, "We can probably head off now," and started to go. I eased forward, branches snapping under my weight. The other person also left, rustling through the brush on the other way without saying a word. The sound retreated, deliberate, fading into the dark. "Some mysteries don't let you go," I stumbled out, my flashlight trembling in my hand. So, while I don't know what I was hunkered down with, it wasn't human. Was bigger than a raccoon and smaller than a fully grown bear. A coyote? A young bear? No idea. But it was definitely kind of freaky. My mind raced, piecing together the moment, the breathing, the silence, the size. I rejoined the game, but the thrill was gone, replaced by a weight I couldn't shake. The forest felt alive, its eyes on me, waiting for my next move. The camp buzzed with kids' laughter, but I was quiet. Scanning the trees, I couldn't stop hearing that breath, feeling that presence. I told a counselor, expecting a joke about animals. He frowned, mentioning tracks found near the camp. Too big for a coyote, too small for a bear. The woods held something, and I'd been closer to it than I wanted. I stayed out of the brush after that, sticking to open paths. My flashlight always on. Every rustle made me flinch. Every shadow felt like it. I asked around, cautious not to sound spooked. Older campers whispered about the woods, stories of hunters seeing shapes that didn't fit, hearing breaths. Where no one stood, one tail stuck. A creature, neither man nor beast, that watched from the trees. I laughed it off. but my heart wasn't in it. The camp felt different now. Its games a thin veil over something older. I found a claw mark on a tree near the brush, fresh and deep, too high for a raccoon. I didn't tell the kids, didn't want to scare them. I dug into the area's history later, poring over local lore. The forest had been sacred once, a place of rituals and warnings. Settlers spoke of a guardian, a spirit or beast that roamed the woods, silent but ever present. Was that what I'd hidden with, sharing the dark like a secret? The stories didn't name it, only cautioned respect. I started carrying a knife on hikes, not for courage, but for comfort. The camp ended, but the memory stayed, sharp and unyielding, a question without an answer. Back home, I dreamed of the brush, the breathing loud in my ears. I'd wake, checking my window, half expecting to see something watching. The forest was miles away, but it followed me, its silence louder than any scream. I don't play hide and seek anymore, not in the dark, not where the trees can listen. The camp is still there, its woods unchanged, holding their secrets. Whatever I hid with that night, it knew I was there, and I'll never forget it. Story number 21, The Rock's Mischief. The river flowed, but the stone held secrets. My brother, an avid fisherman, ventured with friends onto native land where they shouldn't have trespassed, casting lines in a forbidden river. My brother went fishing with some friends on some native land that they really shouldn't have been on. Amidst the catch, he found a peculiarly shaped rock, its surface oddly compelling, and brought it home. While fishing, my brother finds a funny shaped rock and he brings it home. To me, it was just a stone, but he was captivated, polishing it until it gleamed and placing it on his bathroom windowsill. I look at it and think it's just a regular rock, but he decides to shine it and leave it on his bathroom window. The rock sat still, but the house began to stir. The soap wandered, and unease crept in. At first, nothing seemed amiss. The rock a quiet trophy, nothing happens. But soon, strange things unfolded. My brother's soap, always nestled in its dish, began moving to bizarre places. The soap in his bathroom is always moved. You know, most people leave the soap in the little soap dish, as does he. He'd yell, accusing us of pranks, finding it in a sock drawer once, absurdly tucked away. He starts yelling out who's moved his soap, and it would be found in the oddest of places. I think the funniest was once in a sock in his drawer. The house laughed, but no one played the joke. The keys vanished, and doubt grew. We denied meddling, and he interrogated us, but no one cared enough to hide soap. After interrogating the family, I think it was pretty clear that no one could be bothered enough to be hiding his soap. Then it worsened. His keys, wallet, even his passport disappeared for weeks, turning up in places like under his bed or in a coat pocket. Then it escalated to his keys, his wallet, even his passport were missing for about a month. The rock, gleaming on the sill, became his suspect. Its stillness mocked us, and the house felt wrong. The rock returned, and peace restored. Convinced the stone was the culprit, he resolved to undo his mistake, taking it back to the river's edge on his next trip, leaving it where he'd found it. All in all, he decided that it must have been the rock. He took the rock back to exactly where he found it on his next fishing trip, left it there. The mischief ceased. The soap stayed put, and his belongings stopped wandering. According to him, everything stopped after that. The land reclaimed its own, and the house exhaled. The mystery lingers, And I wonder still, I never felt the rock's influence, my skepticism unshaken. But my brother's no liar. His relief undeniable. I'm unsure. Nothing ever happened to me. My brother is a lot of things, but certainly not a liar. Was it the land spirit, offended by the theft, or mere coincidence? The rock's absence silenced the chaos, leaving questions unanswered. The river keeps its truth, and I tread lightly now. Its weight haunts me, a reminder that some things belong where they're found. Story number 22, Glimmers of the Endless Road. The highway stretched like an endless artery, its cracked asphalt hiding truths no driver should uncover. Its reflectors glinting under the night's pale glow, casting shadows that danced with a life of their own. I rolled forward, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Oil, dust, something older, something that clung to the air, something that knew my name. The lanes warped, their lines bending as if the road itself was alive, its edges pulsing with a rhythm I couldn't name. I was no stranger to long hauls, but this was different. This was alive. This was a truth that pulsed in the dark. The tires hummed, their rhythm groaning as I drove. A sound that stirred in the silence, a beat that wasn't mine. The side mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the wheel, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The highway wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. I peered ahead, the distance stretching, its horizon bending as if the road was watching, waiting. The headlights flickered, their beams warping into patterns that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air grew denser, thick with a weight that pressed against my mind, a weight that followed me. The route wasn't mine, it belonged to something else, something that stirred in the shadows. The night deepened. The highway's pulse a drumbeat under my rig, its silence a predator. I carried my focus, a frail shield against the unknown, but the lanes disagreed, their edges alive with mystery. I was a witness, a driver, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The wind whispered, the road a canvas of tubs spent and lost, its miles holding echoes of those who'd traveled here. I was no stranger to freight, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The highway was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me. I'm a truck driver. I was crossing Texas in the middle of the night. After a while, I become white-line mesmerized when I notice a few red lights slowly flashing ahead. Huh? Construction zone, I guess. Except as I'm coming out of my self-imposed hypnosis, I slowly become aware that more and more red lights are there on both sides of the highway, and they're all blinking at the same time. The highway's pulse was a spark, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the panic. The highway's shadows deepened as I drove, the cab's pulse a drumbeat under my hands, but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my unease, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place, oil, dust, something older, something that clung to the road, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the dashboard. The route wasn't just a path. It was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the horizon stretching, its edges warping as if the highway was blinking, watching, waiting. The side mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the wheel, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The road wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The night loomed ahead, its lights shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy, with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory, not my own. I saw flashes, voices in winds, footsteps on gravel, faces I didn't know but felt I should. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The headlights danced, their glow bending as if the highway was warping. I slowed down, the cab, a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the road was watching, waiting. The night was a wait, its miles a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd driven. I was a witness, a driver, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The darkness filtered through the glass, but the highway disagreed. Its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to trance, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The route was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. Fully awake now, I find myself trying to find the ends of the light to the left or the right. I feel like hammering over the hedge. It never ends. It never ends that way. I'm really beginning to freak out. The highway's pulse was a rate, its shadows a truth that lingered in the air, a truth that followed me to the realization. The mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine, eyes that pulsed in the dark. But, oh, wait, it was just a wind farm, and I'm an idiot. The highway was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that held me in its grip, a truth that changed me, a truth I couldn't unsee. The highway's shadows lingered as I laughed, the cab's pulse a drumbeat under my seat. But the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my relief, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place, oil, dust, something older, something that clung to the road, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the view. The route wasn't just a path, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the turbines stretching, their edges warping as if the highway was blinking, watching, waiting. The side mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the wheel, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The road wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The night loomed ahead, its lights shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy, with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in winds, footsteps on gravel, faces I didn't know but felt I should. their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The headlights danced, their glow bending as if the highway was warping. I sped up, the cab a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the road was watching, waiting. The night was await, its miles a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd driven. I was a witness, a driver, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The darkness filtered through the glass, but the highway disagreed. Its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to mistakes, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The route was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. The highway's shadows followed me as I drove on, the rig's pulse a drumbeat under my hands, but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my reflection, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Oil, dust, something older, something that clung to the road, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols, that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the dashboard. The route wasn't just a path, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the lane stretching, its edges warping as if the highway was blinking, watching, waiting. The city mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on the wheel, but the faces were gone, the glass clear, the silence heavier. The road wasn't empty, it was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The night loomed ahead, its edges shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in winds, footsteps on gravel, faces I didn't know but felt I should. Their eyes had hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The headlights danced, their glow bending as if the highway was warping. I pressed on, the cab a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the road was watching, waiting. The night was a wait, its miles a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd driven. I was a witness, a driver, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The darkness filtered through the pain, but the highway disagreed, its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to roads, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The route was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark. The highway's shadows lingered as I rested, the stop's pulse a drumbeat in my chest, but the silence was a predator, its truths whispering in the dark. I carried my lesson, the air heavy with a scent I couldn't place. Oil, dust, something older, something that clung to the memory, something that knew my fears. The windows glinted, their glass etched with faint lines, almost symbols that glowed faintly before fading, casting eerie patterns across the lot. The route wasn't just a path, it was a witness, a keeper of secrets, a truth that pulsed in the dark. I paused, the lot stretching, its edges warping as if the highway was blinking, watching, waiting. The city mirror glinted, its reflection warped, showing not just me, but fragments of others, faces I didn't know, eyes that weren't mine. I blinked, my heart a drum, my breath catching, my hands trembling on my log. But the faces were gone. The glass clear, the silence heavier. The road wasn't empty. It was full, brimming with a presence I couldn't name, a truth I couldn't escape. The dawn loomed ahead, its light shadowed, but the air was wrong, heavy with a pressure behind my eyes, a feeling like a memory not my own. I saw flashes, voices in winds, footsteps on gravel, faces I didn't know but felt I should, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving without sound. The sunlight danced, its glow bending as if the highway was warping. I stepped out, the lot a frail refuge, but the shadows lingered, their edges too sharp, too alive, as if the road was watching, waiting. The morning was a weight, its miles a canvas of lives spent and lost, holding echoes of those who'd driven. I was a witness, a driver, marked by a secret I couldn't unknow. The daylight filtered through the sky, but the highway disagreed, its shadows lingering, its pulse a drumbeat that followed me. I was no stranger to halls, but this was alive, a truth I couldn't escape. The route was a record, a mystery that pulsed in the dark, a mystery I carried forward. Still breathing? Good. But remember, some stories stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Don't forget to like, comment your favorite scare, and subscribe for more true American terror. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.